This is the moment the narrative starts to collapse.
The
Say
lowest
those stats.
positivity in 20 years
Yeah,
of
and I think
anything.
that's
and
right.
Listen,
That's right.
he patently, bold-faced lied about illegal immigrants and criminality. He said that the man who had killed the Ukrainian woman in Charlotte, North Carolina, Irina, was an undocumented immigrant who had been let in by Biden. That was a lie.
That's
He's a
not
U.S.
true.
citizen. He was born in North Carolina.
You're right. He misspoke, but it was another
12,000
policy failure that led to him killing
That was
her.
purposeful.
A pretty heated moment unfolded on CNN when Navarro joined Abby Phillip's panel and ended up clashing with MAGA commentators Lydia Moynihan and Jason Rantz. The debate quickly turned intense as the panel pushed back and forth over their arguments. We're going to look at some of the key moments from that exchange, and I'll share my thoughts on what was said. Let's get into it.
They were all looking around for cues from their colleagues because they didn't have the courage to stand on their own. And that, more than anything, Bill, is the saddest commentary on the Democratic Party, that not only will they not stand for the idea that Americans should come first, they won't even have the courage of their convictions. They lean on the person to their left and their right rather than actually have some conviction.
But Omar says that she has no regrets.
And I think many people look at that moment when the president says it is our responsibility to protect Americans, and he does not acknowledge the fact that two Americans, two of my constituents, two of our neighbors were killed. And it was important for me to just remind the American people that the president and his administration was responsible for killing two American citizens.
Congressman Moskowitz, you were in the room last night, right? Was that moment what Donald Trump ultimately wanted and what perhaps your Democratic leadership wanted to avoid?
Oh, yeah, no, the president clearly came in with a strategy to do that, right? His strategy was to try to rage bait people into that fight. He wanted that, and he got it. Look, ultimately, he's not deporting two members of Congress, just like he didn't lock up Hillary, even though that was chanted in arenas, around the country. So, look, he can't fix his poll numbers. He can't turn around the fact that he's underwater on the economy, underwater on immigration, the two issues that helped get him elected. So what he's going to try to do is he's going to try to fight to the point where he tries to make us not an option, right? He wants to just bring us down with him to the hope that that might help him somehow survive the midterms. This is the new strategy. He met with his pollsters. They saw where everything is. They can't turn around their stuff. They've ruined it in the first year. So the strategy is to try to bring everybody down in order to survive the midterms.
So Rashida Tlaib responded to Trump. She said, can't take two Muslims talking back and correcting him, so now he's crashing out. And then she used the hashtag President Majnoon, which means crazy or insane in Persian.
Yeah, I mean, she also got what she wanted, which was a mistake, I think, for the Democrats to play into that. I actually agree with the congressman. I think the president was setting up Democrats in a really simple and easy way. They shouldn't have fallen for it. It seems pretty easy to stand up and say, actually, no, I support American people first. That is where I stand. And we can have a nuanced conversation afterwards if you want about illegal immigration. But they walked into that trap because it was so easy to set.
Well, but that's not true. I mean, I stand for
most Democrats did not stand.
I stand for Americans over non-citizens, and so do all of my colleagues. But just because it's not the Galactic Senate, just because the Emperor says rise doesn't mean I get up. Like I'm a different. You rose sometimes. I'm a different branch of government. I rose for the heroes that were in the gallery, not because the president.
But not for the other point. I mean, you rose because, and thank you for rising. I think in those cases that this is an easy moment to be united, whether it's around Team USA or it's around any of the people who were featured there. But that's sending a message that you agree with the statement or the sentiment, and you chose not to stand.
Well, I'm sure if Joe Biden told Republicans to rise, they would have leapt from their seats.
But to that point, doesn't that happen at every single State of the Union address? The president says something innocuous. The party that is the opposite party doesn't stand. That happens every single year.
Yeah,
Navarro clearly understands the dynamic at play here, because what we're seeing isn't just about one politician anymore. It reflects the direction the entire Republican Party has taken in the MAGA era. Over the past several years, the line between traditional Republican politics and the Trump movement has essentially disappeared. For many voters and commentators, the two now operate as one and the same. Donald Trump's political style has always relied heavily on confrontation and personal attacks. Instead of focusing on detailed policy arguments or measurable achievements, much of his public messaging revolves around targeting opponents and dominating the conversation through provocation. That tone has gradually shaped the broader political culture around him. Supporters often highlight accomplishments or claim major successes under his leadership, but public opinion polling paints a more complicated picture. Depending on which surveys you examine, his approval numbers have frequently hovered in the lower range compared with past presidents. At the same time, he maintains a core group of extremely loyal supporters who remain committed regardless of criticism or controversy. The larger issue Navarro points toward is how political discourse has shifted over time. The current climate didn't suddenly appear overnight, but Trump's rise certainly intensified it. The rhetoric has become sharper, the accusations more extreme, and the focus increasingly centered on cultural conflict rather than policy proposals that appeal to a broad majority of voters.
I don't feel like
these shouting matches used to happen. I mean, they started happening maybe in my memory with Joe Wilson under Obama. I don't like Donald Trump. I don't support Donald Trump, but I am an institutionalist, and I think that there is a pomp and circumstance and gravitas to something like the State of the Union. Does he use it to lie? Yes. Does he use it to divide? Does he use it to attack immigrants? Yes. But that doesn't mean that that two congresspeople should be in this shouting match. And look, what he tweeted out today is horribly racist. And I say this as somebody that gets told the same thing over and over again. Go back to where you came from. I can't tell you how many times I open up social media and it says, go eat a burrito and go back to Mexico, because racists are so stupid, they don't realize there's more than one country in Latin America, and I'm not from Mexico. Also, I don't eat burritos. I like tacos. But the fact that what he said is racist and it is horrible, and it's, it emboldens and it strengthens, empowers racism. My question is, how does it help American citizens to have the President of the United States and two congresspeople in a pissing match over stupidity? How does it help them have lower grocery prices? How does it help him have access to healthcare, access to housing? And actually, I think it's, you talk about Donald Trump goading them into this. I think this is really stupid by Donald Trump. I mean, most people use the State of the Union as a launching pad to then go out and sell their agenda and try to have it be a good moment for them. And instead, he's out there in the, in the bottom of the gutter.
For decades, Republican messaging has often leaned heavily on labeling Democrats with dramatic ideological terms, particularly accusations of socialism or communism. The problem with repeating those claims so frequently is that many Americans eventually looked at Democratic policies and realized they didn't resemble those labels at all. When the rhetoric doesn't match reality, the argument loses credibility. As a result, the tone of political debate has been pulled further and further downward. Conversations that once revolved around policy differences now often revolve around insults, accusations, and constant outrage cycles. Navarro's point reflects a concern shared by many observers. When political communication falls into that pattern long enough, it becomes difficult to imagine how the country returns to a more constructive form of debate. And that raises a bigger question about the future of political discourse in the United States. If the incentives continue to reward confrontation and spectacle over substance, can the conversation ever shift back toward something more productive? Or has the tone of modern politics permanently changed?
To expect the President of the United States, the Commander-in-Chief, to set the tone in the room for the State of the Union.
Yes, it's asking too much.
Okay, but
it's asking too much.
It had to be awful tough. I talked to a lot of members of Congress about attending versus not attending. Both of the congresswomen who the President, the Commander-in-Chief, have been after for a while now.
Yeah, that's true.
Were in the room, in their seats, on behalf of the people that they represent. I served as a law enforcement officer for a lot of years, and to even ask or make a statement that you need to protect this group first over another group. When I was on the street, if somebody needed help, I didn't check their citizenship before I helped them. So the president started off trying to divide, which he does so well, the nation, right? And you want to talk about protecting Americans? That's exactly what Ilhan Omar was doing, talking about 2 U.S. citizens who were killed under very questionable circumstances in her district.
Is it fair for her to raise that? I mean, Trump is asking about protecting Americans. Is it fair for her to raise the 2 Americans who were killed?
Well, I think Trump's entire speech was actually pretty unifying. I think Donald Trump's superpower is positioning himself as the common sense guy who's advocating for positions that the vast majority of Americans want. And there was one moment at the beginning where he invited the USA hockey team. And of course, the crowd went wild chanting USA, USA. And then the camera panned to Rashida Tlaib, who appeared to be mouthing KKK. And then again, you had another moment where Trump says, stand up if you want to support American citizens over illegal aliens. And instead, Ilhan Omar is screaming and heckling the president. And those are the best kind of sound bites and visuals that the GOP can have for the midterms, because a lot of people might not like Donald Trump and might be kind of hemming and hawing. And then they look at the alternative and they say, oh, well, this really angry woman, gosh, I don't know about her. So that's what Trump set out to do.
That was my question.
Highlight the 80-20 issues.
In response to his own question, is it fair for the Democrats to respond, why, yes, we do care about American citizens, including two that were killed?
Yes, it is fair, but not in that venue. It is fair, but not at that moment.
That the President of the United States did not even mention the 2 U.S. citizens that were killed in Minnesota. How do you do the State of the Union, because you care about Americans so much, and not even mention the 2 people who lost their lives on the streets of America at the hand of federal agents?
One who tried to run over.
But how do you not even, you can do your commentary all you want, or, critique, but how do you not mention that 2 people died in that environment? And the president was one of the most unifying speeches. The president who said, look at the Democrats, aren't they crazy? He obviously does not understand that when he won election, he is supposed to represent all people.
When you go through some of the moments he went to, right, he pointed to a little girl, Delilah, who was almost killed by an illegal alien, miraculously came back. She was there with her dad. When you have Democrats who won't stand and applaud her recovery, yeah, I think that's crazy.
Sadly, people are killed in America every day. Sadly. And the majority of them are killed by U.S. citizens. So whether an undocumented immigrant, whether it's an undocumented immigrant or a U.S. citizen who's the perpetrator, the bottom line is somebody has died or someone has been
One died as a result
injured.
of bad policy that was in place for 4 years, allowing people to come into this country unvetted illegally. And if we had border policies that actually worked, those people wouldn't be here, and those deaths would not have occurred. That's the difference. So when you can point directly to policy, I think that's obviously well within the scope of any president, Democrat or Republican.
Yeah, by the way, it went so well in Minnesota that the president sidelined his secretary, skipped her in the cabinet meeting, replaced her with Tom Homan, who then pulled everybody out. So yeah, it worked real well that they abandoned it and left. That's number one. Number two is, look, Donald Trump there's a lot of verbs and adjectives to describe. Unifying is not one of them. He doesn't even think he's unifying. That's not his strategy.
Two-thirds of the people who watched the speech thought it was very positive, and they liked it.
Actually, it was the lowest positivity in 20 years of any.
I think that's right.
Listen, he patently bold-faced lied about illegal immigrants and criminality. He said that the man who had killed the Ukrainian woman in Charlotte, North Carolina, Irina, was an undocumented immigrant who had been let in by Biden. That was a lie. He's a U.S. citizen. He was born in North Carolina.
You're right. He said, but it was another policy failure that led to him killing her.
That was purposeful. Him using illegal immigrants as the boogeyman. He said 12,000 murderers had been allowed in by Joe Biden. That's made up. He's making that number up and conflating
we don't
numbers.
know.
That is no.
We don't know. There's maybe 20 people who
we do know because ICE has put out numbers. We actually do know that that's not true. It is a lie. Listen, he lied over 20 times. Daniel Dale from CNN has done the fact checking, and a lot of those lies were about immigration. He said Maduro opened up the prisons and the insane asylums. There is no evidence, zero, that Maduro did that. Castro did it in 1980. But there is zero evidence that Maduro did it in the last few years.
This is kind of the whole point. You're literally defending Maduro in Venezuela right now.
Maduro. I am telling you the guy you say is unifying is a pathological liar.
What you see in moments like this is a familiar strategy that frequently appears in debates involving MAGA commentators. On panels like the one hosted by Abby Phillip, when someone like Navarro brings forward documented information, such as data showing that the narrative about widespread violence among immigrants is greatly exaggerated, the response often isn't to engage with the evidence itself. Instead, the tactic shifts toward questioning whether the information can be trusted at all. The logic essentially becomes, if the numbers aren't perfect, then maybe they shouldn't be believed. But that kind of argument could be applied to almost anything. Statistics exist because experts, researchers, and public agencies track them carefully. Whether it's crime rates, economic trends, or traffic fatalities, there are entire systems dedicated to collecting and verifying that information. Dismissing it outright simply because someone claims uncertainty doesn't actually refute the data. It just sidesteps it. This pattern shows up repeatedly with certain commentators who appear on programs like Abby Phillip's panel. While the political slogan "facts over feelings" is often used by MAGA supporters, the debate style sometimes looks very different in practice. Instead of engaging with studies, reports, or documented records, the conversation frequently shifts toward personal interpretation or isolated anecdotes. For example, if a single incident involving an immigrant becomes widely reported, that one event can suddenly be framed as proof of a much broader narrative, even when larger datasets show a very different picture. Individual stories are powerful, but they don't replace comprehensive evidence about overall trends. A similar dynamic appears in discussions about political rhetoric itself. When Navarro points out that Donald Trump has made thousands of false or misleading claims, something that has been extensively tracked by fact-checking organizations. The response from some commentators is to frame that as simply a matter of opinion rather than something documented. You can see the contrast clearly when different panelists reference the same event but describe it in completely different ways. One person might cite measurable indicators, such as polling data or historical comparisons, to evaluate a speech or political moment. Another might describe it as inspiring or unifying based entirely on personal interpretation. That tension between evidence and perception has become a defining feature of many modern political debates. Numbers, studies, and polling provide one lens for understanding events, while emotional reactions and partisan narratives provide another. And when those two frameworks collide on live television panels, the result is often exactly what viewers see in exchanges like this one. At the end of the day, public opinion itself provides one of the clearest indicators of how political messages are being received. Polling across multiple organizations consistently shows that large portions of the American public remain deeply divided about Donald Trump and the direction of his political movement. Whether someone supports him strongly or opposes him strongly, those numbers illustrate just how polarized the political landscape has become. Moments like this panel debate reflect that divide, and they raise important questions about how political arguments are made, how facts are interpreted, and how viewers decide which version of events they trust. When you look at exchanges like this, the deeper issue isn't just one argument on a television panel. It's about how political conversations are being framed more broadly. When evidence and documented data are presented on one side, and the response on the other side relies mostly on dismissing that information as just an opinion, the debate stops being about facts and starts becoming a battle of narratives. And that shift in how political arguments are made has real consequences for how people understand what's actually happening in the country. It also feeds into a wider environment where suspicion, exaggeration, and political hostility can spread much more easily. When entire groups of people are repeatedly portrayed as dangerous or threatening without evidence, it doesn't just stay inside political commentary. It shapes public perception and raises the temperature of the national conversation. That's why discussions like this matter far beyond a single panel segment. So what are your thoughts on how rhetoric like this can contribute to political hostility and even political threats in today's climate? Do you think debates like the one we just watched help clarify the facts, or do they end up deepening the division even more? Let me know what you think down in the comments. And if you enjoyed the video, make sure to give it a like and subscribe to the channel. That support really does help us out. Until next time, this has been the Policy Vault, where we cut through the noise so you don't have to. Thanks for watching.